Good morning, all of you. Welcome back to the channel. So let's start with today's analysis session for 10th of July 2023. So the first important article for today is that objections overruled and forest bill goes to House unchanged. So here we're talking about the forest bill. So let's understand this whole debate. Parliamentary committee it endorses the proposed amendments to the Forest Conservation Act of 1980 in its entirety. And apart from this, Environment Ministry denies the charge that changes dilute various protections in the law. So that is one of the concern. And what becomes important is the recommendation of the proposed amendments in this act. And touching a raw nerve, so the proposed amendment to the Forest Conservation Act, it has attracted objections on various grounds. So that includes dilution, the Supreme Court's 1996 judgment in Govardhan in Godvarman case that extended protection to wide tracts of forest, even if they were not recorded as forests. So it is believed that this judgment is being surpassed through the proposed amendments. Second is that in geographically sensitive areas within 10 kilometers of the international borders or the line of control, no forest clearance required to construct the highways or hydropower projects and so on. Thirdly, is that there is no central protection for the vast tracts of so-called deemed forest and permitting activities such as tourism or compromising their integrity. So these are several concerns regarding the amendments. So repolling would be held in 600 booths in West Bengal today for the local body elections. So death toll in the violence that marred the panchayat elections in West Bengal rose to 18. So despite the deployment of the central forces, some like violent incidences, they were reported from the state, and that's why repolling it has also been ordered. So that was because the voting it was suspended as violence broke out. So Delhi government shuts schools and it issues the flood warning as torrential rain continues to lash the capital. So water level in Yamuna may cross the danger mark on Tuesday, and officials they are inspecting the problem areas. Heavy rain puts pressure on the system. So every year the same thing gets repeated, but the situation remains the same. So in Varanasi, turtles help clean the Ganga. So that's something interesting. So basically, under the Namami Gange program, large-scale human efforts they have been undertaken since 2014 to clean the Ganga and rejuvenate nearly 2,600 kilometers of the river's network. And in this marine life, especially the turtles, they've been playing a key role as well. So in 2014, the Wildlife Institute of India and the Ministry of Forest, they joined hands with the National Mission for Clean Ganga, the agency that is implementing the Namami Gange program. And since 2017, they have been running the Turtle Breeding and Rehabilitation Center in UP's Varanasi. So about a dozen of the 29 turtle species in India, both they are herbivorous also, carnivorous turtle species also, they help by clearing the rotten or the half-burnt human bodies as well as the flowers which are dumped into the river air. So that is the role being played by the turtles. So around 5,000 turtles they have been released since 2017. This year 1,000 more they will be released to strengthen this program. And Ganga Action Plan it was set up in late 1980s. The center it has so far released over rupees 40,000 turtles into the river. So that's basically the role that is being played by the turtles in cleaning the Ganga River. Coming to the editorial page, so and this is talking about one particular scheme of South Indian states, the Annabhagya fiasco. There was like some dispute between the center and this particular state over the release of the food grains from FCI. So there were few changes which were being made by the central government, and because of which the supply to the state that was disrupted or that came under question. So state obviously they'll be now looking at what the alternatives in order to secure safer supply of rice in order to make sure that this scheme is not affected. So that was the whole issue, and that is being discussed here. So we already discussed about what were the changes being done by the government under this procurement scheme. Moving forward, so let's see the other important topics. So restoring the World Trade Organization's crown jewels. So in 2022, the member countries of the WTO, they managed to hammer out a face-saving deal, and India too it played a vital role. So at the Geneva Ministerial Conference, they were keeping faith in the trade multilateralism alive. So that is one dimension that is being focused upon. An important part was resurrecting the WTO's dispute settlement system, which is also called the WTO's crown jewel by 2024. So efforts are being undertaken in order to restore the effectiveness of the system back. And since 2019, we see that WTO's two-tier DSS, it remains paralyzed because of the unappointment of the members in this body. Then there is one appellate body also, which is the second tier, and it hears the appeals from the WTO panels. It is also non-functional because the United States, it single-handedly, it has blocked appointment of the members. So that is another thing. And apart from that, the precedent problem. So US reproaches the appellate body for judicial overreach and exceeding its assigned institutional mandate. So that is one of the allegations that is being leveled by USA against this dispute settlement body of basically judicial overreach. And it argues that till the time the appellate body's role that is defined precisely, it cannot be resurrected. So that is one of the demands by US. And one major problem that the US identifies is that the appellate body, contrary to the text of the WTO's dispute settlement understanding, it has been creating binding precedents through its decisions. So that is another problem. So it's like well established that there is no rule of precedent in international law. So WTO's this dispute settlement mechanism, it also makes this clear in Article 3.2 by stating that appellate body rulings, they can neither add nor diminish the rights and the obligations of the WTO member countries. But at the same time, it is also, incumbent on the appellate body to ensure that there is consistency in the interpretation and application of the WTO agreements without creating a binding precedent. So basically, the orders or the decisions, they are not binding in nature. So the appellate body, it is not the only international court that follows its previous decisions. Other international courts, such as International Court of Justice, or when we talk about the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, they also follow the past decisions unless there are valid reasons not to do so. So at any rate, it has been proposed that WTO member countries, they can adopt a statement that the appellate body rulings, they do not create precedents. However, it will not satisfy the USA. So that's there. So dejudicialization of the trade multilateralism. So the larger game plan of the US seems to be the dejudicialization of trade multilateralism as we know it. So these are the keywords, you need to keep them in mind. So WTO, it was created in a world that was resplendent with the new liberal consensus that emerged after the Cold War and the collapse of communism. So you need to be obviously clear with the evolution of WTO and its history, when it was formed, how it was formed, and then apart from this, what are all other agreements under WTO that is important, and the issues to which India is connected. So WTO, it became the visible hand of the law to regulate the global trade. So that period saw not only the legislation of international relations, but also its judicialization, that is expansion of international courts and tribunals that dominate the decision making in place of the national actors. So basically, that's what USA wants. It wants to dejudicialize because obviously USA wants an upper hand in this body, or we can say the WTO. But this arguably, it erodes the sovereignty of the nations as well, as they lose the control over the critical decision making. So dejudicialization, it is a reverse phenomenon where countries, they weaken the international courts to take back decision making power. So when we're talking about dejudicialization, so the power goes into the hands of the countries. And given the emerging geo-economic challenges which are being posed by rising Russia, US wants to exercise full power over its trade policies, throwing off the shackles of the appellate body's judicial review. So because of these changing geopolitical conditions and the emerging challenges, that's why USA wants to control things accordingly. But again, at the same time, it shouldn't be confused with exerting political oversight over the appellate body to improve its working. So Washington, it has identified multiple problems with the dispute settlement system, but it has seldom offered constructive suggestions at the same time. So one option that the countries they have is to elect the appellate body members by resorting to voting at the WTO's General Council meeting. But this will again antagonize the US. So are the countries willing to go down that road or not? Should be thought about. So that's one possible option, that you can elect the members, as this thing, it has been delayed. So yesterday we took up this topic of the rupee ruble policy and agreement, and what are the now concerns related to that. We have talked a lot about de-dollarization, internationalization of rupee. We have talked about the Vostro accounts, and in this context, India and Russia as well. So bad loans, they are at record low, but write-offs, they still in the mix. So non-performing assets of the Indian banks, they are at the lowest levels since 2015. But now we need to understand what the reason behind this decline. So we are having this data from the Financial Stability Report of RBI, which was published in June 2023. So it is a half-yearly publication with contributions from all the financial sector regulators. So let's understand this data. So here the chart one is talking about the GNPAs and the net NPAs continue to decline, and in March this year they reached at 3.9% and 1% respectively, which is the lowest level since 2015. So we were at the peak in around, we can say, beginning of 2019, I can say. So after that, we are seeing a decline in the NPAs, and we are at the lowest level. You can see that there's been a sharp decline during the COVID-19 period. Then the chart shows the return on the assets and the capital to the risk-weighted assets ratio. So ROA, which is return on assets, it is calculated by dividing the net income of the bank by its total assets. So that is also increasing, and the capital to risk weighted assets ratio, that is also rising. So here you need to know about the different categories of NPAs, their conditions. Apart from this, in the second quarter of 2019, NPO ratio, the Indian max was at 9.2%. So that is almost 1 in 10 loans they had turned bad. And then we also had this IBC, which is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So this is another topic, but you need to know about all the nuances related to this topic. And these are like very important for GS3 economy. Moving forward, untangling threads. So this is the basically a new app launched from Meta. Talk about the features. So how has basically been the reaction for to threads, and is Twitter's influence waning with the rise of multiple microblogging sites like these, like Blue Sky? So why is threads not yet available in the European Union? So these are some of the questions. So we'll just go through the gist. So it is the Threads app, which has been launched by Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp parent Meta, and it's a text-based public conversation app that was built by the team behind the photo sharing app Instagram. So Twitter, it has sent a letter to Mark Zuckerberg threatening a lawsuit against him. So they've claimed that Meta had hired dozens of former Twitter employees and used these employees along with the Twitter trade secrets they knew to build Meta's copycat Threads app. So users in the European Union, they were not able to download this app. As Meta, it has delayed releasing this app in these countries due to challenges with the regulatory compliance in the region. So this app is basically text-based public conversation app, and it's available on both iOS and Android mobile phones. So right now it's available in over 100 countries. So basically, how it will work, so it is part of the user's Instagram account, and these users, they will need to sign up through Instagram, and they can cross over with their original username and accounts they were following on the Instagram. So basically, it's related to it. So that's there. So design education in India, its origin, challenges, and the opportunities. So all of that is being discussed about in this article. So India, it is facing a large shortage of designers. So it is estimated that the country produces only one design graduate for every 1,000 engineers. While design appears to be becoming more popular now, there are still only a small number of institutions which are offering design education. So there's limitation of institutions, the quality of the courses, number of courses, and then ultimately, obviously, it results into less number of designers as professionals. So few universities, they have launched undergraduate programs in design this year. So basically, we are shifting our focus towards this new emerging area because its demand is rising. So India is facing a large shortage of designers. So people basically, formal modern design education, it has historically lagged in India until 2000s. There were few institutions which are offering UG or the PG degrees in design. So that was because of the weak demand, but now we are having the supply side challenges because demand is surpassing the supply of the professionals, which are experts in this field. Another problem is that of underutilization, the available designers, and variance in the demand and supply across different areas of design. So army officers, they say that Manipur operations are challenging. So Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it was lifted in many areas in the state. Troops, they have been sensitized not to take any action to alienate the citizens, even if this means falling back in the face of the protests. So Since the situation is very critical or is being handled with care, so operating without the legal cover provided by the ASFA, that is a major limitation that security forces are facing in Manipur. And there has been no instance of attempts to snatch weapons from army troops, even as a large number of weapons they have been looted from other security forces. So challenges being faced by the army and the Assam rifles, they get compounded by the fact that the tasks being undertaken in this complex, volatile, and charged up atmosphere, they're bereft of the legal protection and cover of ASPA. However, challenges notwithstanding, prompt and proactive actions by the army have saved many lives in the state with zero collateral so far. So there is now a very thin line between a commendation and a court martial. So in March this year, the union government had removed ASPA from one district of Assam and within the limits of 4 police stations in Manipur as well. So this took the number of police stations limits without the ASPA to 19. So that's another update elaborating further the sources that the troops they have been sensitized not to take any action to alienate the citizens of the country. So despite all these challenges, Army has exercised maximum self-restraint, which was evident during the recent incidents wherein large groups of women activists they blocked the armed forces, thereby delaying and obstructing the conduct of operations. And then buffer zones they have been created between the areas of the meaties and the cookies, with the area domination patrols being conducted, though there have been continuing instances of violence. So that is there. Obviously, things are going to improve gradually, and we can say that things they are under control. So for this, the static posts they have been established, and technology is being used in the conduct of the operations, including the monitoring by the unmanned aerial vehicles. So basically, you can understand this whole scenario from the perspective of a case study, obviously, and such types of questions are asked in GS4 ethics. So you can use these suggestions like you can create buffer zones if there's such an ethnic violence in any state or any case studies talking about that. Apart from this, how you'll be using technology, modern day technology, to control the situation. So joint combing operations along with the local authorities, they have since resulted in significant recoveries of the weapons and ammunition, but several weapons they are yet to be surrendered. So that's there. So according to activists, they say that you need to amend the personal laws to ensure gender justice. So here, talking about the Uniform Civil Code experts, they say that amending the personal law, it is not possible due to opposition from the clergy. So while we are talking about UCC, so it's important to take into account the interest of the marginalized sections or when talk about the tribal community, because in past also we have had special laws and provisions or even like a dedicated schedule in order to make sure that their interests they are not hampered. So that needs to be taken into account, and obviously we need to ensure that people from every faith they are on the same page when we talk about UCC. So we have talked about why do we actually feel that there's a need for UCC in India. So we've already covered this topic. Then because of heavy rainfall, the topic of disaster management becomes important, because obviously you'll be having different plans for different terrains. Like when we talk about the mountains, obviously we saw different kind of disasters in terms of the landslides, and then in the plain areas you need different plans. So here disaster preparedness becomes important. So different bodies which are related to it, and what kind of policy or plans do we have in this context, we need to know about that. So recently we see that there's a report which is highlighting the impact of pandemic on education. So learning outcomes in the districts, none of the districts, it attained the top two grades according to the performance grading index for the districts. And here you have the score accordingly. So this has been released by the Ministry of Education, the index, the performance grading index for the districts. So obviously there was a decline in the educational performance because of pandemic. So here it is in proper details. We just need to look at things broadly. Coming to the world page. So let's see. So BRICS Summit, it will be in person despite Putin's warrant. So South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that next month's BRICS Summit with the Russian president it has been invited to will be held in person despite an arrest warrant on the Russian leader. So Janet Yellen says her Beijing visit helps put US-China relations on surer footing. So the Treasury Secretary's trip furthers a push by the Biden's administration to steady the ties with China. She says that despite the significant disagreements between the two countries, her talks they had been direct, substantive, and productive. So the major topics of discussion included the need for healthy economic competition and improved communication between the two countries. And also there was talks on cooperation on the grave threat which is being posed by the climate change. So even on this domain, the two countries, they need to collaborate together. And also in the context of climate finance, definitely something has to be done. So, on both the sides, the sentiment that was expressed is that the world is big enough for both of our countries to thrive, to cooperate on the shared global challenges, to have a meaningful economic relationship, and that we needed to stabilize the relationship to make sure that basically the two countries they were able to accomplish the intended goals together. Coming to Mint newspaper, so India fails to draw China plus one FDI flows. So India's manufacturing sector, it has failed to capitalize on the multinational companies' efforts to diversify their supply chains away from China. And FDI data shows this thing that even as manufacturing continues to shrink at the northern neighbor. So basically, we fail to attract the companies which are trying to, diversify their supply chains. They're not shutting down their operations in China, but in order to diversify things and reduce the risks. So that's why they are, basically looking at other alternatives. So here, India, it has failed to attract such MNCs. So expectations of higher inflows into the Indian manufacturing, it had taken root as China's purchasing managers index for the manufacturing. It contracted in 7 of the last 12 months. So basically, when we talk about even the economic recovery of China, even that has not been as per the expectations. And apart from that, completely dependent upon China. That is also not something which is desired for given the geopolitical situation in today's times. So China plus one strategy. So this is known as China plus one strategy. And apart from this, we have talked in detail about the India's manufacturing sector's potential. What are the basically the challenges that we need to deal with? What are the concerns, and how can we deal with them? So this topic has already been discussed in proper detail before. So here, this is just in the context of, what has been India's performance in terms of attracting these MNCs towards it. So that's there. And so in China, we are seeing that the production growth that is slowing down. So we are not getting too positive signs from the China's economy. So talking about coal gasification, so center is likely to roll out the much anticipated viability gap funding scheme for coal gasification. And apart from this, the finance ministry, it is allocated rupees 6,000 crores. So the plan for executing the scheme that has been finalized. And noting that coal gasification, it has so far been successful in countries where coal, it has low ash content. So the Union Minister said that the ash content in the domestic coal is high in case of India. The government aims to make gasification viable and create a success story with the fiscal support to the sector. So you need to know about the characteristics of the coal which is found domestically in India. So firstly, it is one of them is mentioned here that we find high ash content in the domestic coal. So that basically makes it of a lower, or we can say poor quality. So India, it has been making efforts to gasify the coal with high ash content, and the scheme, it will give the government opportunity to promote gasification in large scale commercial projects as well. So basically, through coal gasification, this process, it turns coal into fuel gas, and which is considered a cleaner option than burning coal to produce energy. So this basically helps in reduction the release of the greenhouse gases, and the gas produced through the process, it can be used to produce gaseous fuels like hydrogen, methane, methanol, and ethanol. And obviously, green hydrogen in itself is a very important topic. So most of the coal produced in India, it goes into feeding the thermal power plants, with the power sector moving towards renewable sources. So the use of coal for the thermal power generation, it will come down in the long run, intensifying the demand for the alternative uses of coal. So this is one of the constructive point which can be part of your answers, that in the long run we can focus upon coal gasification instead of directly using coal in the thermal power plants. And so that's the whole idea about it. Coming to Financial Express newspaper, here let's see what are the important topics for today. So the road shows in 30 nations to focus on 106 firms. So road shows planned in US, Canada, Japan, all these countries. And the trade part of the plan, it has identified 12 countries for the export push. And investment part of the two-leg plan for making the country a bigger exporter also seeks to engage Indians living abroad. So Intermandi e-NAM up to 90% first quarter. So with more states, they are allowing trade of the agricultural commodities using the digital wholesale agricultural marketing platform. That is Electronic National Agricultural Market, ENAM. There has been a spurt in the trading amongst the various markets within the state as well as the interstate level as well. So we are seeing things improving on this portal, with obviously more awareness being generated about the benefits of it, and farmers, they can obviously is economically also viable for them. So we are seeing that activity is increasing on the ENAM portal. So when we talk about its outreach, so there are around 1,361 mandis from 27 states or UT. 17.5 million farmers are engaged on this platform. And that's there. So must showcase the historical, cultural heritage and wildlife of Madhya Pradesh to delegates during the G20 meeting in Indore. So with G20, all these, subsequent topics, they also become important from the perspective of examination. Like now you need to find out about what the important cultural heritage and wildlife heritage of the state of Madhya Pradesh. So you need to know about all of them and the basic details about them. Then benefit from the surge in the Russian crude imports, lower oil prices to cut the subsidy and cool the inflation and also support growth. So significant savings have been done because of increased dependence upon the Russian crude oil. So $85 per barrel is the level at which the government is understood to have factored in crude at for the budget estimations. But when we talk about the actual figure, it turned out to be somewhere around $77 per barrel. This is where the crude basket averaged in the first 4 months. So Indian crude basket has been seen $5 per barrel lower than the budget estimates. So we have been able to save huge amount of forex reserves. So lower crude prices mean multiple gains for India on the fiscal and the macroeconomic fronts. So even in terms of inflation also, because India, it is dependent upon importing 85% of its crude oil. So if the prices, we were able to get it at cheaper price, so that also helped in basically lowering the current account deficit, reducing the imported inflation, and then further diversifying the crude oil partners for India. So these were some of the potential benefits that India gained and one of the positive outcomes for India of this Ukraine war. So gaming firms have submitted two proposals to the government for self-regulatory bodies. So self-regulatory organizations, they will have to come up with a framework to define the content of an online game in view of the safeguard users against harm. So the online gaming companies, they will have to display a mark of verification by the self-regulatory body on the games as well. So even when we talk about, taxing the online gaming thing, that is another area. Here we're talking about self-regulation. And even like how the gaming sector, this gaming industry, it has impacted the users mentally as well. That's another thing. So data centers business is also an emerging area. So the growing demand for the digital transformation, it has made data center businesses a key focus for AMD, and having India as one of our leading markets, it's a testament to the progress being made. So India is the second largest market in the Asia Pacific region. So data centers, and obviously now we are having the latest draft bill, the data protection bill, and we've discussed about the concerns related to that bill. So let's see once that is present in the parliament during the monsoon session, and then how the debate goes about it. Taking up the Indian Express newspaper, so see the important topics. So intense rainfall has been witnessed in the last 24 hours in northern India. So we have already talked about in this context the topic of disaster management that becomes important, and accordingly how the plans they vary as per the geographical terrain of region. So after refusing rice to Karnataka, FCI finds no takers in the e-auction. So the FCI it had enough stock to meet the Karnataka's request for rice, but the two issues they probably weighed on the center's mind. So one was that the prices, if they rise, then FCI should have enough stock to effectively intervene in the market. Second was what if other states they make similar demands about basically rice. So with elections around the corner, political parties they can make promises and then knock at FCI doors for more grains. So that is how the things are going about. So from food security to nutritional security, we see that PAU it develops new wheat variety to keep the blood sugar and obesity in check. So from quantity to quality and from food security to nutritional security, this seems to be the new research focus of the Punjab Agriculture University. So Ludhiana-based institution which played a pivotal role during the Green Revolution also to make India surplus in the food grains by developing the high yielding strains. It has bred a new wheat variety with high amylose starch content known to reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. So behind the waterlogging rules and absent drainage plan. So why does the capital flood during the rain? As I was speaking about this topic in the beginning. So this is the same story remains for every year. So we need a proper drainage plan in order to tackle the situation and see some improvement. So Delhi High Court rejects the PepsiCo's appeal over the potato patent. So what's the whole case about? It's one of the very important topics. So this case is about the FL 2027, which is a potato variety with high dry matter and low sugar content, which is better suited for making the chips. So the lays that we get. So this is the variety of potato which is used. So normal table potatoes, they have more moisture, which adds to dehydration and energy costs during the processing and higher sugar, which causes blackening on frying. So that is the basic difference. So this variety of potato it was developed in 1996 by Robert W. Hoops, who's a U.S. breeder employed with this agricultural research, which is division of PepsiCo Inc. So that's there. So the later it has been manufacturing potato chips which are sold under its Lay's brand using this processing grade variety, which is grown by some 14,000 farmers in India via the contract cultivation and buyback at pre-fixed rates. So this is an example of the contract farming also. Like 14,000 farmers, they are in contract with PepsiCo in order to cultivate such uh, variety of potato, and then they sell this to Lay's or PepsiCo at a predetermined price. So PepsiCo India Holdings, the subsidiary of the US food snack and beverage giant, it was granted certificate of registration for this variety as an extant variety in 2016. So validity period during which nobody else could commercially produce this type of variety, sell it or market, distribute, import, export without the breeder's authorization, it was 6 years from the date of registration and extendable up to 15 years. So what changed after that? So this PP VFRA, this is the authority that had earlier granted registration to this, but it revoked the same through an order passed in December 2021. So basically, this registration, which was granted to the company, that was revoked in 2021. So it also issued a letter in 2022 rejecting the PepsiCo's India's application for renewal of its registration. So this was challenged in High Court, in the Delhi High Court by PepsiCo, and the court in its ruling, it upheld the authority's decision. So basically, they were not allowed to, go for new registration for this variety. So why was their registration revoked? So PepsiCo had in its application, it had saw the registration of this variety as new variety. So this, when the company had given the date of its commercialization in India as 2009. So a new variety, it had to conform to the criteria of novelty at the same time, and that required the propagated or harvested material from it not to have been sold in India earlier than 1 year before the date of filing of the application. So will this ruling impact the investor confidence in India's IP regime for protection of plant varieties and breeders' rights or not? So probably not, because the High Court, it has merely faulted PepsiCo for wrongly applying for registration under the category of new variety and giving an incorrect date for its first commercialization. So basically, data has been misused here, and any protection granted for a plant variety, it is subject to the applicant making a complete disclosure of his claimed intervention or development. So basically, there needs to be proper transparency and accountability in the system. So this is similar to the requirements of the Patents Act as well, which also grants monopoly in exchange of complete disclosure. So battery electric vehicles, what are the problems with them? So they are at the heart of the government's push for net zero battery electric vehicles. However, what has worked for Norway and China may not work for India. So while electrification, that is the future, but roadmap remains unclear. So there are 4 types of electric vehicles. This is extremely important. The HEVs, which is the conventional hybrid electric vehicles. Examples of the cars of different companies are mentioned here. They are a combine of the conventional ICE system with an electric propulsion system, resulting in a hybrid drivetrain that substantially lowers the fuel usage. So the battery is conventional hybrid. It is charged with the IC engine, is powering the drivetrain. Then the next variety that we have is the plug-in hybrid vehicles. So they would also have a hybrid drivetrain that uses both ICE and the electric power for the motive power, backed by rechargeable batteries that can be, in this case, plugged into a power source for recharging them. Third is the like vehicles, that example, the Bs, that is a battery electric vehicles. Examples are Tata Nexon. So these, they have no ICE, they don't have that conventional ICE system or a fuel tank, and they run on fully electric drivetrain powered by rechargeable batteries. Lastly, we have the fuel cell vehicles. So they use hydrogen to power an onboard electric motor, and they combine hydrogen and oxygen to produce electricity, which runs the motor, and the only residue of the chemical process is water. So since they are powered entirely by the electricity, these are considered electric vehicles. But unlike the battery electric vehicles, their range and refueling process, they are comparable to conventional cars and trucks. So these are the minute differences between them. So here also we are having new technologies being discussed about hybrids or ethanol and the flex fuel, which we talk about. So flex fuel or flexible fuel vehicle, it has an internal combustion engine, but unlike A regular petrol or diesel vehicle, it can run on more than one type of fuel. So even a mixture of fuels like petrol and ethanol can work for it. Then synthetic fuels like German manufacturer Porsche, it's developing a synthetic fuel that it says it can make an internal combustion engine as clean as electric vehicle. So the idea is to make all these systems work in the context of the situation that we have in India, the realities of India. So that needs to be in harmony with that. So talking about the issues of the battery electric vehicles push. So upfront subsidy is one thing which the government is providing in order to increase its attractiveness to the consumers. So the battery electric vehicles experience across markets from Norway to the US and China shows that electric push works only if it is backed by the state subsidies. So an elaborate system of incentives, it is central to the Norway's EV policy. So even in these countries, they have seen that only when it is being supported by the government subsidy, basically then people, they are having the trust in such types of cars or the technology, we can say. So government waives the high taxes that is it imposes on the sales of non-electrics, and it lets the electric cars run in the bus lanes, toll roads, they are free for them. So here the problem is the overt subsidization of electric vehicles. Especially, it is going to be a challenge for developing countries like India. So offering tax breaks on the companies, and this ends up in the hands of the middle or the upper middle class, who are typically the buyers of the battery electric four-wheelers. Then charging network is another challenge right now. So a World Bank analysis found that investing in the charging infra is 4 to 7 times more effective in electric vehicles adoption than providing upfront purchase subsidies. So if consumers, they would be knowing that there exists adequate amount of charging infrastructure across different regions, so they would not be skeptical about, the range of the vehicle. So that is going to be, it is believed to have much more impact on the consumers or the buyer's mind, rather than, whether a subsidy is being provided by the government or not. So India, it is building upon the charging infrastructure as well. So the number of EVs that had crossed 1 million by mid 2022, and it will likely grow to 45 to 50 million by 2030. But there are only about 2,000 public charging stations which are currently operational. Then electricity source is another important thing. If you're using renewable energy to supply electricity to these charging stations, then only it would be, meaningful. Otherwise, there's no point, because if electricity is coming from the conventional sources and that is being used to charge these electric vehicles, so what's the point of then having an electric vehicle? So in the several countries that have pushed EVs, much of the electricity is generated from renewables. So Norway, it has 99% hydroelectric power, and in India, the grid is still fed largely by the coal-fired thermal plants. So unless this generation mix changes significantly, India would be using fossil fuels generation to power electric vehicles. So theoretically, at least, this would mean reduced tailpipe emissions in the cities, but continuing the pollution from the running of these thermal plants. So this is the advantage of substitution of oil imports though. So that's another important area which can be missed, but this is again a very important thing. Then value chain is another challenge. So as India struggles to make roads into the global lithium value chain, there is discussion on the need to diversify the country's dependence on the lithium-ion batteries in the electric vehicle mix. So we require lithium in order to manufacture these batteries. So the demand for the lithium-ion batteries from India is projected to grow at the compound annual growth rate of more than 30% by volume. And this translates to more than 50,000 tons of lithium requirement for the country to manufacture the EV batteries alone. But more than 90% of the global lithium production is concentrated in Chile, Argentina and Bolivia, alongside Australia and China, and other key inputs such as cobalt and nickel, they are mined in the Congo and Indonesia. So India would therefore be almost entirely dependent on the imports for a small pool of from a small pool of countries to cater to its demand. So we need to look at other sustainable alternatives in order to get these raw materials. Then on the editorial page, climate of concern. So India seems ready to take on El Nino, but vegetable prices are also a matter of concern. So it seems that the government's Operation Green, which started off with tomatoes, onion, and potatoes and extended to other vegetables, it has not delivered in taming the prices of top, and it needs a serious revisit, and our research in this area suggests that it needs to be taken out of the ambit of the Ministry of Food Processing and entrusted with an independent body specializing in the vegetable value chains with a proper and a clear mandate. So this is basically talking about how can we make the scheme much more effective and actually get the desired results. So the heat is on and extreme weather events are here to stay. Governments must plan ahead to deal with the consequences accordingly. So on 3 different days last week, global average daily temperatures, they were in a range they have never been before. So the range has increased massively. Last Monday was the first time global average daily temperature crossed 17 degrees Celsius, making it the hottest day for the planet in recorded history. But that was just the beginning. So the Tuesday, it was even hotter, and that record was surpassed on Thursday as well. So these are basically, we are seeing the impact of climate change and heat that is getting increasingly unbearable. We need to have a proper plan to deal with these situations. So now we are dealing with excessive rains, which are frequent floods and droughts, intense forest fires are all happening, sometimes simultaneously also at different places. So there is little that governments can immediately do to prevent these, but a lot can be done to minimize their toll on the human beings, at least in the case of heat waves. So even for these different impacts, we need to have the plans accordingly. So we can learn from basically the events in the past. And it might seem odd to be talking about heat waves when rains have been lashing many parts of the country. So we are seeing such type of incidences and the impacts happening simultaneously. So that is what the climate change is all about. So this article is talking about the data protection bill. It must aim at making things easy for the ordinary users and the small firms. So with the data portability, digital nagariks, they will be able to vote with their feet. They won't be at the mercy of the powerful platforms forced to suffer harm such as pervasive surveillance. So indeed, some of the ways in which users they are exploited by big data systems are harrowing. But many small businesses, for example, they sell their wares on the large e-commerce platforms in hope of supplementing their income, only to find that the same e-commerce platforms leverage the data they generate to launch rival products and undercut their business. So this is talking about one dimension. So it is suggesting that basically what is lacking in the bill. So government needs to introduce the data portability and interoperability provisions in the bill. So doing so, it will constrain the incumbent tech platforms from abusing the user data and empowering of the users. So the stakes they are high given the indispensability of the internet to modern life. So now is the right time for the government to act to strike while the iron is hot. So again, this article is about the data protection bill. So it is expected that it may lower the age of consent and ease the related norms. So reducing the age of consent from 18 is the key ask of the industries. So definitely this part of the population is very important for even the gaming industries. So accordingly, their demands vary. So let's see what are going to be the exact provisions of this bill once it is tabled. So FPIs, which is the foreign portfolio investors, they continue to buy Indian shares in the second quarter as well. So with this, we are also seeing its impact on the stock market, on the capitals market. We are seeing that it's being bullish as of now. So Finance Minister, she nudges the PSU banks to take swift action against frauds and the willful defaulters. So today we discussed a lot about the NPAs as well. So the question that I raised, you need to find out about them. What are different kinds of NPAs, different categories, and what are the basis of their categorization. So we were understanding the trend of how basically the trend has been changing in India. The new trade expansion plan to woo around 10 global companies across 30 countries. So new trade plan, basically, this is given under the scenario of weakening global demand. So we are basically looking at what can be the other alternatives in order to expand our trade. So the plan, according to the plan, it has identified 12 countries for the export push so that our exports, they keep performing nicely and we're able to sustain that growth level. And then further, apart from the countries, we've also identified different sectors where India it has the potential to grow. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope the ideas that we've discussed today, they are clear to you. And do subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also hit the like button for the video.